Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Bart van Sevenant. I'm responsible for the presence control and cybersecurity unit at RightCrowd, and welcome to this RightCrowd webinar. This webinar is all about social distancing and contact tracing. And what we will be doing throughout this webinar is give you, first of all, an overview of the solution itself, explain you how the solution works. After that, we'll give you a short video in which you can see the product at work, so you can get a better idea of what the product looks like, how it's being used by end users. And then after that, we'll go into a demonstration in which you will see what you can do with the data that is being gathered as part of our social distancing and contact tracing solution. So we'll take you through a demonstration of our web portal. So without any further ado, let's dive right into it. And before I show you the actual solution itself, I just want to provide you a little bit of context. The solution that we put together for social distancing and contact tracing is not something we quickly developed earlier in the year when COVID-19 hit the world. What we did is quite the opposite. About 3 years ago, we introduced a new technology solution layer called presence control. And presence control is, really think of it as a layer on top of access control to make security, physical security and safety stronger in large organizations. With access control, which I assume you're all familiar with access control, what you're trying to do is at the point of entry, when someone tries to enter a site or a facility, is to validate, is that person allowed, yes or no? And then if so, open a gate, open a door, something like that. But beyond that point with access control, you lose control. You no longer know what is going on, whether that person is still there. Other people cannot really sort of verify if that person actually allowed to be here. So you get confronted with issues like tailgating and other. And presence control is really a technology layer that we introduced that helps to resolve some of those weaknesses and makes security just overall much more dynamic and powerful. So with presence control, we still leverage the underlying access control database you have, like knowing which users are allowed to go where, but we literally make that visible. So if you enter a facility, you will be able to see that person actually is allowed to be there. And it also makes it dynamic in a sense that whereas normal access control credentials are passive, you only use them when you're opening a door in front of a door reader, those presence control type wearables, as we call them, are active devices that can continuously interact with the environment. So it fits in our overall philosophy of making security smarter, more dynamic, and bring it in line with pretty much everything else in our infrastructures. If you look at it, the buildings that we work in today, everything's connected, everything's digital, except for the people. By means of presence control, we basically digitize people in one way by using those security wearables. And so if we have a closer look at what that then looks like, on this picture, you can see the security wearable that we launched 3 years ago. We called it a digital badge holder. As you can see on the picture, it literally looks like a plastic badge holder in which you insert your cards. On the inside, it's a very smart device. It's able to read out the card you insert. It is able to interact with its environment. It has visual elements that allows you to visualize whether people belong or whether there's a potential security risk or issue. So a very sort of powerful set of technologies. What we've done earlier in the year is that in the context of COVID-19 is we've extended the capabilities of that wearable and of our presence control platform to also do social distancing monitoring and contact tracing. So that's the main topic for today's webinar. If we start with the main goals, what are we trying to achieve with RightCrowd social distancing and contact tracing? It's really all about three things. The first thing has to do with the end user. Keeping a safe physical distance from each other is new. It's new to all of us, and it is a change in behavior, and every change in behavior is difficult. So the first sort of value proposition of what we're proposing here is having that continuous reminder towards everyone to keep a safe distance. And the way we do that, and we'll explain it in more detail, is using that visual element that is part of our digital badge holder to literally visually warn people, be careful, you're coming too close to the other person. So that's the first very important part, continuously remind people to keep a safe distance. The second part of the value proposition is gathering a lot of data for you and giving you insight across your entire workforce. How well is social distancing being respected? Knowing when do people not keep a safe distance? How many times does that occur? Where does it occur? When does that occur? So having all of data available and also having that trending information. Are we getting better as an organization over time? Yes or no? And then the last part of the solution relates to contact tracing. That very often ultimately becomes the main driver for buying this type of solution. And contact tracing really can make the difference between having to shut down an entire operation because one or more people got infected with the virus versus knowing this person got infected, but we know based on facts that he or she only came in contact with these 5 other individuals. So we'll take action and ask those 5 individuals to, for example, quarantine, but still be able to keep the rest of the operation open. So that's, in a nutshell, the 3 main goals we're trying to achieve. So let's now look at how the solution actually works. And we will start with a description from an end user perspective. So if I'm an employee of a large organization that is using RightCrowd social distancing and contact tracing, how would that work? I arrive at work in the morning, could be an office environment, could be a factory. I arrive and either I already have my digital badge holder or I pick one up at reception. And the only action that is required from me as an end user is taking my existing access badge, the badge I used to get into the building, and simply slip it into the badge holder. That's it. It's as simple as that. As soon as I've done that, my badge holder will be activated. It's being activated automatically. As an end user, I don't need to know how that is being done. In reality, it is done by means of a gateway device, which I will talk about in more detail later on. But so I arrive in the building, I simply slip my card into the badge holder, and it activates. I will be able to check whether the device is running correctly because the LED on the device, as soon as I've entered the building, will start showing a green glowing light, which is just a visual reassurance that social distancing and contact tracing is active. As of that moment, each of the badge holders that people are wearing will start to continuously monitor the others. They will check who else is around me, and they will also do a measurement of the distance, like how far is that other person from myself. And when 2 or more people come too close to each other, then the first part of the solution kicks in. That visual warning to say, hey, be careful, you're coming too close to the other person. So what you'll see is that both badge holders in the example on the slide, as soon as those 2 people in the example come too close to each other, the 2 badge holders will switch from their normal green glowing light, all is fine, to then start showing a yellow flashing light. So you will see the yellow blinking light on the other person's badge holder, knowing like, hey, I need to be careful, I come too close. We then have a warning period, which by default is 5 seconds, but it's a software setting, so it could be made longer or shorter. But again, by default, 5 seconds. And that gives those people a little bit of time to then reestablish a secure distance. If they do so, so if they take a step back and they get back to more than 6 feet or 2 meters apart from each other, then nothing has happened and no information has been stored. I want to be very clear about that. However, if those 2 people would remain too close beyond that warning period, then at that point, 2 things will happen. The first one is that both badge holders will switch from the yellow blinking, which was the warning, to a red blinking, more of an alarm type state. So visually, you now see, hey, you really remain too close, I'm going to that alarm state. The second thing that happens is that at that point in time, both devices will start to record what we call a close contact event. It's an event that keeps track of what was the unique ID number of the other sort of device that came too close to me. When did that happen? So an exact timestamp of the start of that close contact event, and then the duration. For how long did that other device stay too close to me? That information is stored inside each of those badge holders. These devices do that completely autonomously, so they can continue to sort of record close contact events. The devices can store up to 500 of them. If at some point those devices come back in range of one of our gateway devices, and again, you'll see more about that gateway device later on, but when you come back in sort of what we call in range, so within the proximity of such a gateway, at that point, that gateway will establish a secure connection with our backend platform, which resides in the cloud, and those close contact events will be uploaded into the database. So if I recap, people enter the building in the morning, have their badge inserted. The badges do their own social distancing monitoring autonomously. They can capture one or more close contact events throughout the day. Those events are then transferred back to the backend by means of the gateways. And at the end of the day, when people leave the premise, the only action that is required from them is either to take their badge out or simply slip it up by ½ an inch or ½ a centimeter so that it stops doing the social distancing monitoring and contact tracing. So that's a quick sort of overview of how the solution works from an end user perspective. What we'll do now is switch to just a very short 1-minute video in which you will see the device at work, and you'll see a few people sort of walking around with it, and you'll see what happens if they come too close to each other. Good. So I hope this gave you a bit of a view on what the product looks like. What we'll do now is switch to the reporting that comes with it. So as I explained, those close contact events, as they're being gathered throughout the day, at some point when people walk back in range, as we call it, from our gateways, those events are being uploaded. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at the reporting that you can then see as an authorized user. And authorized users for most of our clients are people that are part of the HR organization, health and safety, sometimes physical security or facilities. So these types of people would have access to the dashboard that we're looking at. This dashboard runs on top of our software platform. That platform by default sits in the cloud. We have our cloud deployments in both the US and Europe. So depending on where your organization or locations are based, we can restore the data either in the European Union or in the United States of America. So what we're looking at here is not just a sort of dummy set of data. We are using this technology for social distancing monitoring, contact tracing also within RightCrowd. So in RightCrowd, we have offices in different locations around the globe. So what we're looking at is our internal dashboard. So when people go into our offices, and we're not back in sort of full force yet in our offices. We have about 1/3 of the employees returning to the office at this point in time. But when they do, they wear the badge holders, and so we keep track of the close contacts that are being generated by those people. So what we're looking at is the reporting, and the first thing I want to explain is at the top, you see 3 different filters, and these are sort of the lenses that you have to look at the close contact information. The first filter relates to the time period that you're interested in. We have a couple of default settings. You can say, I'm interested in data from today, last week, last 2 weeks. Let's take last 2 weeks in this example. Or if you would want to, you can select a very specific period of time yourself, including the exact starting hour and end hour. So that's the first filter you have. The second filter you have is the duration of the close contacts. What we're looking at this point is all of the data. So even if 2 people stay too close to each other for just like 2 seconds beyond the warning period, as I explained, you would see it in this data set. But if you want to, you can filter this down and say, no, I'm only interested in close contacts that lasted at least, for example, 1 minute. And we have a couple of different settings, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then 15 minutes, which is the definition that the WHO organization is using for close contacts. But for the sake of the example, let's look at all of the close contacts that lasted at least 1 minute. And then the third filter we have is a location filter. We work with organizations that are very large in terms of size. They have either offices or factories in several places around the globe. So what you're able to do in our solution is build your own hierarchy of locations, countries, within those countries, states, cities, and then buildings within that. Some clients even go up to the level of floors in a building. And so what you're able to do, you build up that location tree in this other section of the dashboard here on the left, and then you can apply that location tree to then also filter the data you're looking at. So if you're responsible, as an example, for health and safety of a certain plant or a certain subset of your organization, you're able to filter that out and then just look at that data. For now, for the demonstration, let's look at this filter. So we selected the last 2 weeks. We selected close contact events of 1 minute and more and all locations. What we can see is that the result of this is that we have 29 close contacts that happened in that period of time. And those 29 close contacts were generated by 17 individuals. And those 17 individuals came out of the total of 45 active users that we saw in the RightCrowd offices in this 2-week period. You can also then see some of the averages, aggregated number of contacts per users, total contact time. We also show in this summary view the longest contact. So we see that a certain visitor, because the V stands for a visitor to the RightCrowd office, was in close contact, a close contact that lasted 26 minutes and 59 seconds with a person in our dataset represented as the Kraken. You can also see a visual representation of the percentage of people with close contacts and then some of those social distance trends. This becomes very interesting once you start using this for multiple months. You'll be able to see how that evolves over time. And we show the total number of close contacts, total contact duration, and the total amount of people with close contacts. The next thing we then will want to do is, if we know that 17 people had close contacts, is want to have more detail about those people. And I've mentioned the word people and persons a couple of times, but of course, and I will go into a bit more detail later on, from a privacy, from a GDPR perspective, what you will not find in our system is actual names. So we're not showing John Smith came too close to Jane Doe. What we will do in the systems is, in most cases, use another personal identifier, as we call it, that represents a person. In our case at RightCrowd, what we do is we use employee numbers, E, and then a certain set of characters sort of following that, and then a V for visitor cards. We have other clients that use literally their HR employee numbers. Others use a reference number from their Active Directory. Some of our clients use the badge numbers, so the card serial number of the badge that is inserted to the holder. So there's several options that you can pick and choose from. But so in our case, what we're looking at here is we have 17 people that had close contacts represented in the first column by their employee number. And what we can see for each of them, each of those 17 people, we will see when was the first close contact in the reporting period that we selected. Where did those close contact events happen? If all of them happened in one particular location, we'll show that. It will be sort of aggregating. If you had close contact events into different events, it will roll it up and say, for example, United States, if it happened in 2 buildings across the US. And then it will also show the following other data. It will show the total duration. This first person had a total number of close contacts for a duration of 1 hour and 33 minutes and 8 seconds. This person had 9 close contacts, so 9 times that the badge holders switched to the red blinking saying, you're staying too close to this other person beyond the warning period. And these 9 were generated with 6 unique individuals. And you'll notice that there's a difference. I may have been too close to a particular person more than once. So that's what you would see here. If we then look at the details, so if I click on the plus sign here in front, you'll see that the 6 people that this person came too close to, you see that we now see the breakdown of these 6 individuals. For example, the first one is visitor number 11. So this person came too close to this visitor for a total duration of 29 minutes and 51 seconds. And that was made up by 2 events, 2 times that they came too close. And if I would want to have a look at the details, I can click on that and I can see the exact times when those close contacts happened. If at some point in time someone would get infected within the organization, you will want to get the contact tracing information. So who did this person came into close contact with? What do you do at this point? Very simple. You select the time period that you're interested in. For example, I want to have the data related to close contact for the last month. You could also say, no, I'm only interested in the last couple of days, whatever your internal policy is. In this particular case, for contact tracing, I may be interested to say, like, I want to literally have all of the people that infected person came too close with, even if it only lasts for 4 seconds. I want to at least have that data. So we've set our filters, and then we can select the person that we're interested in. I'm going to go to our visitor, which I know has a number of sort of events associated with it. So let's say that we get a notification that the visitor number 1 was infected by the COVID-19 virus, and we want to know exactly who did that person come in close contact with. Well, he was at our premises, and we'll get like the complete list of all of the people that have been close to visitor 1, who has been in our office for a fairly long amount of time. You'll see that he came too close to 12 people within our organization. In total, there were 151 sort of interactions, and we have the exact breakdowns with each of those people. And if you would want to know the exact details, you have them here as well. At that point in time, because keep in mind, we're not storing actual names in our system. At that point in time, you will probably want to download the information. So you have this little Excel button, and you'll get 2 reports from us. One is a summary report, just giving like the high-level information, and then the detailed report, which literally gives every single close contact interaction related to the individual that we selected. So that was a quick overview of the reporting that comes with our sort of social distancing and contact tracing solution. Let's go back to our overview for a few more slides and a bit more explanation on how the technology works behind the scenes. But before we go into the architecture, one additional point on the RightCrowd app, which can be used in conjunction with the solution. As I explained, the badge holder will visually warn people when they come too close, when a close contact is being generated. If you also use the RightCrowd app with it, you have 2 additional sort of feature functionalities that will be added. The first one is an audible alert. So if you have the RightCrowd app installed, what you would do, and it's very straightforward from a user experience perspective, you download the app from the App Store or the Google Play Store. You open it up, and the way to log into the app is very simple. You just tap your phone against your active badge holder. That's it. It automatically logs in. So it sort of piggybacks from an authentication perspective on the fact that you're wearing an active badge holders. And then when you have the phone, for example, in your back pocket, if a close contact event is being triggered, so you're staying too close to someone else beyond that warning period, then at that point, you will have both the badge holder starting to blink red, as well as your phone vibrating and making a sound to warn you. Second thing that the app will add in the context of social distancing and contact tracing is that in the app, you're able to look at your own close contact events. We are, for privacy and GDPR reasons, not showing who else you came into close contact with, but you will see all of your close contact events. For example, I had 4 today, 1 at 10 a.m., 1 at 10:17, and so on. Let's have a closer look at the technology behind this solution. And on this slide, I've laid out the different sort of components that are part of the solution. and I'm going to start with the badge holder itself. So we've spoken about it a little bit, but some more technical details. The device does the social distancing monitoring and contact tracing using Bluetooth Low Energy. So using the BLE protocol, we assess the distance from another device. BLE is not a very precise technology, to be very transparent. So when we say 6 feet or 2 meters, it's approximate. There can be an error rate on sort of that approximation, but important, given the fact that we are using BLE, it has the advantage that those devices scale very well. You can literally be in the same room with tens or even hundreds of people, and the devices will still continue to do the social distancing monitoring in a very performant way. And then from a battery perspective, because of the fact that we're using Bluetooth Low Energy, those devices can last anywhere between 1 week and 2 working weeks, 40 to 80 working hours. So that means at least a full week using this at the office before you have to recharge it. Recharging the devices, how is that being done? There's 2 ways. The model that is most often used for employees is have the employees recharge their own device. The device has a standard micro USB port in it. So with any standard micro USB cable, you can just plug it in and it recharges. If it is completely empty, it takes just under 4 hours to fully charge it. And as a user, you're being warned when your battery is running low. There are several ways in which we do that. When you insert your card, it will first indicate the battery status in a visual way. If you insert the card and the first green blinks are green, you're still very good. If the first 3 blinks are yellow, your battery is between 10 and 20%. If the first 3 blinks are red, you know that you need to recharge your device. So that's first element from badge holder perspective. So it uses the Bluetooth Low Energy protocol to do the social distancing sort of measurement and approximating the distance. Second important thing to know about a badge holder is that it can read out smart cards. So if the access badges you use to get into the building today, if those cards are smart cards, think of cards like MyFair cards, Desfire cards, HID Corporate 1000 cards that are operating at what is known as the 13.56 megahertz bands. All of those cards can be read out by our badge holder, and that allows you to basically associate a user with a badge holder automatically. So we then are able to track the device by means of the card inserted into the device. So that's on the badge holder. There's also on the charging side a second option, being that charging station that you can see on the picture. That is mostly used in case of visitor badges, because then you can store those badge holders for the visitors at your reception and have them sort of plugged into the charging station, so you're sure that they're always well charged. The device top middle on the slide here is the gateway device that I've spoken about a couple of times. So this device is a so-called PoE, Power over Ethernet device. You plug it into a powered Ethernet connection. The device will talk Bluetooth Low Energy with the badge holders, and then over the Ethernet connection, reach back out to our cloud. So when you deploy these gateways, they need to be put either onto a VLAN or on a guest network or on a corporate network that then has sort of access out to our cloud. The backend software runs, as I mentioned, in the cloud. We use Google Cloud data centers in Europe and the US to operate this environment in. So all of those gateways talk back to that environment. Then we have the RightCrowd app, which we've spoken about. And then optionally, you can integrate our platform with your physical access control system. That is not mandatory for doing social distancing monitoring and contact tracing. And as a matter of fact, the majority of our clients today are using the solution completely standalone, not connected to anything else. But if you want to use our technology also for other use cases, which I will get to in a couple of minutes from now, then in that case, connecting it up to a physical access control system may be very useful and in some cases even necessary. Before we go there, I want to talk just for 2 minutes about privacy and how we sort of link the badge holders, the wearables, to people and the different options you have in that regard. First of all, there are really 2 models that you can pick and choose from for using the badge holders. The first model is the ability to link it to a person by means of the badge that you insert into the wearable. So in this first model, it does not matter which badge holder they pick. You can pick a random badge holder, put your card in it, and we will know who the person is based on the badge inserted. That assumes that we're able to read out the card. So that first model is possible if you are using smart cards as you're building access cards. The second option is basically ignoring the card you insert. So you insert your access badge, even if it's a card that we cannot read, that is okay. You just insert it to activate the device. And in that second model, we will link the badge holder directly to a person. So in the second model, it becomes a personal device. Every person receives a specific wearable. Each wearable has a unique identifier and a serial number. That serial number is printed on the back of the device. And so in the second model, you know, John Smith has received badge holder with serial number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's the two sort of base models that you choose from. And then regardless of which model you choose, you then have the choice from a reporting perspective. As I showed you in the demonstration, we had the first column showing who was the person that had close contact. That first column, you can then choose whether you want to see just the serial number of the device or the card number, depending on the option you choose, as I just explained. Or what you can also do in our system is add or map that to other personal identifier information. And that's pretty much what I showed you in the demonstration. You did not see a card number or a badge holder identification number, but you saw an employee number. So in our system, you can do that mapping between, in the first model, if you use the cards as the identification mechanism, you, for each card, can map a couple of 1 or 2 personal identifiers to it. If you use the second model, using the serial number of the holder, you can then map, same thing, personal identifiers to that holder. Last option you have is the ability to actually connect this up to a physical access control system. And in that case, the sort of identity is not going to be stored in our system, but we're simply going to point to your physical access control system. So in that model, we are going to use the card. So you insert the card is being read out, and we basically talk your physical access control system to then resolve that to a user ID or a name, depending on the privacy setting that you selected in our platform. So in summary, many different options. Those options have been put in place to really comply to a lot of the privacy standards out there, so you can really set this up and use our system without having any name ever stored in our database. You simply map it to identifiers that allow you to then easily map it back to an actual person's name. Last thing I want to do before we wrap up is give you a brief overview of some of the other things you can do with those badge holders. As I explained at the beginning, this is part of our presence control product line, a product line that is aiming at helping you with multiple things in the physical security, safety, compliance space. So I'm highlighting just 3 of the examples, but there's more. There's also evacuation management. There's plans we have in the logical access control space. But the ones I want to briefly highlight are the following. First one is secure area. So this badge holder, in the default model, as I explained, when an employee arrives in the office in the morning, we have that badge holder turning on, showing that green glowing light. You can do something more sophisticated than that. What you can do is that when you enter the facility, it starts showing the green light. But when at some point throughout the day, you go into a more secure area, let's take the example of an R&D department. You want that not just anyone can just walk into the R&D department, because there's some proprietary information that can be on the screens or on the desk of people working in that department. So what you can do there is when people badge to go into the R&D department, we will then make the light change depending on whether or not they're authorized to go into that. If I badge at the R&D department and I'm allowed in based on your physical access control system granting me access, we can then have the light change from green to something else. And you have a choice in our system to say, either I'm going to pick a color myself. So I'm going to say anyone authorized to go into the R&D department, the badge holder at that point will switch to, for example, dark blue. Or you can even put it into a high secure mode whereby our software will randomly pick a color, And we will even have that color change over time. So everyone in the R&D department may be dark blue now, but in an hour from now, all of the badge holders at the exact same time will change to a next completely random color, for example, pink. So at any point in time, you just look around, everyone should have the same color in that R&D department. If you see someone not showing that color, you know they simply don't belong, don't have the authorization to be there. Last thing on this example, if I would badge at the R&D department, I'm not allowed, the badge holder will tell me that. Not only will the door not open, but my badge holder will blink red for 10 seconds, indicating, sorry, you don't have access rights to go into this particular area. Second use case is visitor management, leveraging the same badge holders for visitor management. And what we're doing specifically is the ability to enforce what is known as host escort policies. A lot of organizations have those. They say visitors should not be wandering around through our facilities on their own. They should always stay with their host. And what we're doing with the technology here is almost the inverse of social distancing. We don't want that visitor to come too close to the host, of course, in current COVID situation, but also the other way around. We don't want the visitor to really leave the host either. So if the visitor would go too far away from the host, we would have the first yellow warning period, very similar to social distancing, and then the red alert state if they stay too far away from the host for a longer period of time. At that point, we also warn the host through the app, and we generate a security event that could, as an example, be picked up by a security guard to go and look for that visitor. And last use case I want to briefly touch on is open offices. Very exciting use case. Think of a different way of securing your large corporate environments. Imagine you go into a big corporate office. Downstairs, you have what you would normally expect. A reception desk, you have cameras, you have turnstiles, so you really have that sort of hard perimeter validating the identity. Does the person have a good reason to be in this office, etc. But then beyond that, imagine that you step into the elevator, you go to the 7th floor, you step out of the elevator, and you simply have a big open office environment. There's no wall, there's no door readers, there's no additional badging I need to do. I just step out of the elevator. A gateway device picks me up as soon as the elevator opens up. If I'm allowed to be on that 7th floor, I get whatever the right color code for that floor is. And as everyone else on the floor, I will show the same correct color. But if I'm not supposed to be on the 7th floor, my badge holder is going to blink red, simply indicating, no, you're not supposed to be here. You don't have rights to be on this particular floor. So a very subtle, but still very effective way of doing access and presence control in an open office type environment allows you to save quite a bit on infrastructure costs, much more flexible also. You can literally change access rights from floor to floor on the fly. So a very different way of looking at securing those types of environments. So that's really what I wanted to cover as part of this webinar, give you an overview of the presence control solution that is the foundation for social distancing contact tracing, explaining how it works with the yellow warning and the red blinking, the close contact events being generated. You saw the product at work, you saw some of the reporting, and it was just a quick snapshot. There's much more behind if you would go into our web portal. And then a couple of things on how the technology works and some of the other use cases for which this technology can be leveraged. Last thing I want to briefly highlight, we very often get the question like, can we sort of test out this technology? Can we test out social distancing and contact tracing? Yes, you can, and there's really two ways to go about it. One, if you really just want to see a couple of devices and test it out, we have these starter kits that you can see on the slide here. They are, and that's important to understand, this is the fully functioning solution. So it comes with badge holders, with a gateway, the second one, the starter kit plus, also with a charging station. We set you up in a domain. This price includes not just the equipment, but it also includes the services to set you up, to help you with the deployment, to give you a quick training on using the dashboard, etc. So that's one way of validating our solution. The other way, which a lot of organizations have opted for, is to do a small pilot. And then we're talking about 20, 50, 100 type badge holders, pick one specific department or building, and literally use the technology for social distancing, contact tracing for a 1-month period. And you'll really experience how it helps to sort of address social distancing. So that's the two options you have. If you would be interested in getting more information about this technology, if you would want to try it out, do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us at rightcrowd.com. You can fill out the inquiry form and we'll get back to you, get in touch with you to have a follow-up discussion, or you can email me directly. My email address, bart.vansevenant@rightcrowd.com, is on this particular slide here, so do not hesitate to reach out. I would like to thank you very much for attending today's webinar. I hope you learned and understood how our solution works and really hope to get in touch with you very soon. Bye-bye.